What's up everyone and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Garry sends a warning to the welterweight division. Although Ian Machado Garry is coming off his first ever loss, the outspoken welterweight served notice to his fellow contenders that he's ready to take on all comers. And before we continue, make sure to leave a like on the video to help support the channel. Garry faced Shavkat Rakhmonov at UFC 310 earlier this month, and despite being unable to hand Rakhmonov his first loss, the future's stock rose considerably. After all, not only did Garry become the first man ever to go the distance with Rakhmonov, but the fight was close. All three judges scored it 48-47. It remains to be seen what's next for the Irish fighter, but as he told MMA Knockout recently, Garry believes he secured himself as the number 2 contender in the division. Shavkat, the way I look at this is that the fight against Shavkat was to be the number 1 contender in the world and go out and fight for the belt next. If I'm not the number 1 contender, of which Shavkat got his hand raised and has now cemented himself, I'm definitely number 2. That's the way I look at it, because there's no way after that performance you can't sit there and say that I'm not one of the best in the division. So whatever the rankings want to officially say, it's okay. Officially, Garry is currently ranked number 7 in the UFC's welterweight rankings, but based on what he showed against Rakhmonov, there's little doubt that he'll be tapped to face another top contender. While discussing his next fight, Garry delivered this warning. I know in my heart and my soul, and I see the fans are giving me a lot of love and a lot of respect for that fight, I'm absolutely in my mind the number 2 contender in the world, so could I see the UFC booking me as a replacement? Yes. Do I think it's realistic? Potentially. However, we'll see when the cards come. If they want that, if they need that, I'll say one thing, I'll be ready if they want me. Like I always am. Ready, prepared for anyone and anywhere. It'll be interesting to see who the UFC books to fight Garry next, and whether they do consider him as the backup for the expected Belal Muhammad Shavkat Rakhmonov fight. Garry still has some serious problems with Colby Covington, but now that Covington took another loss against Joaquin Buckley, you would think Garry's camp would explore other options. Who do you want to see Garry throw hands with next? Bo Nickal not happy with MMA Media outlet. Dana White's gone to town on the MMA Media several times over the years. So much so, one could argue that nothing spikes White's blood pressure more or prompts him to rant longer than talk about the media. But now, Bo Nickal is calling out an outlet for taking something he said about Jon Jones out of context. It all started ahead of UFC 309, which saw Nickal defeat Paul Craig and Jones stop Stipe Miocic. Before the event, Nickal and Jones ran into each other backstage, and an impromptu/light wrestling exchange ensued. Nickal proceeded to talk about the exchange during an episode of the Overdogs podcast with Mike Perry. During the interview, Nickal apparently joked that he didn't want to humiliate Jones in front of everyone backstage. An outlet apparently took just that quote and spun it as Nickal seriously saying that he took it easy on Jon Jones. That prompted Nickal to share out this fiery response. I said this right after saying I'll beat Steph in a 3-point contest, throw a football further than Josh Allen, hit a homer off Ohtani, and beat Cole Hawker in the 1500 meter. Straight up irresponsible journalism by MMA Uncensored. Next time, get the full quote. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and it almost certainly won't be the last. Case in point, that quote was also used by other outlets as the headline for articles. All that aside, it'll be interesting to see who Nickal faces next. Following his win over Craig, who do you want to see the decorated wrestler face next? Merab Dvalishvili has no chance of beating Umar? Luke Rockhold came out in a recent podcast and said he doesn't believe Merab Dvalishvili has any chance of beating Umar Nurmagomedov at UFC 311. This is what Rockhold has to say on the Jackson podcast.
This is a tough matchup. Merab's just he's a tricky, tough, hard-nosed dude. So it's like when Umar can beat him everywhere. Really, he can outstrike him, and then Merab can shoot in. Umar can counter him and get to his back. I mean, I'm telling you, he's better than him everywhere, really. I mean, Merab might have a wrestling advantage in some way, shape, or form, but not. Think about it, you're like, oh, it's a tough matchup for Umar. But then you start really looking at it, and you're like, wait, he's going to outstrike Merab, and then Merab's going to get frustrated. He's going to shoot in. Umar's going to counter him. He's probably going to get to a dominant position, and it's going to go back up. I don't see it like that fight going any other way.
On the topic of Merab, he recently came out in an interview and said that he wants to defend the UFC title 3 times in 4 months in 2025.
I want to win this fight, and I want to be busy in 2025. I'm fighting early this year, January 18, and I just want to be busy. I know O'Malley wants to come back in April. I think Peter will be ready in March, so maybe fight Peter March, rematch in April. And whoever will be next contender, I will clean the division again.
Conor McGregor hints at $250 million payday for Logan Paul fight. Recently, Conor McGregor raised eyebrows and, let's be honest, prompted many groans when he claimed a boxing match with Logan Paul is in the works. Now, an outlet is reporting that a $250 million agreement has been reached to make McGregor versus Paul a reality. Further, the Notorious One is signaling the story could be accurate. Recently, Emmett Glenn of fight book MMA reported that the massive deal has been brokered by the super rich Ambani family to have McGregor and Paul fight at the Wankhede Stadium in Mumbai. The report states that a $250 million payday is on the line. McGregor proceeded to respond to the story with the following social media post. Well, not surprisingly, plenty of fiery responses from MMA fans soon made the rounds. I hate that this will not happen. I just want to see you get back in combat sports before age takes over your chances. Literally nobody wants to see this. Money grab rehearsed fight? Fight someone in the UFC and prove to yourself that you still have it. Bro still doesn't know if he's fighting Jake or Logan. All he knows is how much more he'll be able to afford after this fight. What a shame Conor's return isn't in a cage but an exhibition boxing match. Disappointed isn't the word. Couldn't imagine years ago that I would see a great like Conor McGregor stoop down to losing an exhibition against a YouTuber, but here we are. No one cares. Fight in the UFC or retire. Literally no one has asked for this. At minimum, it should have been Jake Paul anyway. If they truly would pay this, how much do you think Conor vs. Khabib 2 would be worth hypothetically? We'll see what happens from here and if something official gets announced. But since Logan Paul is under contract to the WWE, which is owned by the same parent company as the UFC's, observers have noted that the fight could be a possibility. Do you care about watching McGregor and Paul box? And do you agree with what a lot of folks have argued? That if this happens, this will almost certainly close the door on McGregor's MMA career? All that aside, recently McGregor got into it with UFC veteran Ramsey Nijem via social media. It looks like it all started when Nijem made a remark about a video McGregor recently posted of him hitting the bag. Eventually, that prompted McGregor to fire back with, "Ramsey Nijem, can you tell us how to win a world title? How about not to get cut from the UFC? #bum. Check it out." Nijem then called on his manager to make the fight happen. But there's a greater chance of McGregor fighting both Jake and Logan Paul in some sort of tag team match at this juncture than facing Nijem. UFC updates. Let's take a look at some news regarding the UFC's upcoming schedule and fights. As this video is being produced, there's been no official announcement, but Gilbert Burns reportedly told AG Fight recently that he expects the UFC will ask him to fight the fast-rising Michael Morales. If Burns agrees, it'll just reinforce how tough and game he is. Morales has done nothing but win in his career to date and is now 5-0 in the UFC. In his last outing, he quickly took out veteran Neil Magny. Burns, meanwhile, is coming off a decision loss to Sean Brady and has lost 3 straight, albeit against elite competition in Brady, Jack Della Maddalena, and Bilal Muhammad. If Morales defeats Burns, he would almost certainly move into the top 10 of the welterweight rankings. Currently, he's ranked number 12, and Durinho is number 8. And it looks like Jacob Malkoun will no longer battle Rodolfo Vieira, as expected at the UFC's February 15th card in Vegas. Recently, the Australian fighter announced via social media that an injury has forced him out of the scrap. "I'm no longer fighting in February. I'm so frustrated that the injuries won't let me show the world that I'm one of the best middleweights in the world. Maybe the years of grinding have caught up, maybe it's not meant to be. Either way, I'm still the mentally toughest guy out there, so I won't just quit. I will do everything in my power to get back and show the world the hard work and the God-given talent I have. Maybe my path to greatness is supposed to be harder than most people. Maybe it'll make my will even stronger, only time will tell. I have faith God that he's doing this for a reason and my faith will never waver. I'm blessed and trust the man above." Malkoun is coming off a stoppage victory over Andrei Petrosky in March, but the 29-year-old has fought only 2 times after competing 3 times in 2022. So you can understand his frustration. Recently, former Rizin bantamweight champ Kai Asakura came over to the UFC to face flyweight king Alexandre Pantoja. Could we see Rizin's current flyweight champion Kyoji Horiguchi return to the octagon? If you're a big or longtime MMA fan, you know that back in the day, Horiguchi was one of the UFC's top flyweights. He challenged Demetrius Johnson back in 2015, but was submitted by the legendary champion. Horiguchi ultimately moved on to Japan's Rizin promotion, as well as Bellator, where he padded his resume with championship wins. Well, ahead of Horiguchi's fight at Rizin 49 on New Year's Eve, he spoke with MMA Fighting, and while doing so, he opened the door to possibly returning to the UFC for a title fight with Pantoja, who's also his teammate at American Top Team. Here's some of what he had to say. "It was my decision to leave the UFC. I made this decision, so I have no regrets, but I do have the feeling of wanting to make another challenge on the UFC. We kind of talk about it in the gym," Horiguchi said while talking about Pantoja specifically. "We joke around and I tell them that I can beat you up anytime, I'll beat you up and stuff like that. You know, we kind of joke around, but you know, if it's a title fight, I think the gym would have to accept it. It is what it is and it's what we do. If it happens, I think we could make it happen." Given Pantoja is quickly running out of challengers currently on the UFC roster, it wouldn't be shocking if this fight happens. And we're still waiting to find out who and when Dustin Poirier will fight next, but all signs point to an announcement in the near future. Following Poirier's submission loss to the current lightweight king, Islam Makhachev, in June, the Diamond had said that he wants to fight one more time. Poirier has been telling fans an announcement should come shortly, and he repeated that when asked recently about fight news. Soon. Who do you think Poirier's opponent will be? Islam Makhachev reveals sad news on first fight with Arman Tsarukyan. To this day, many believe that Arman Tsarukyan has been the toughest test Islam Makhachev has faced in the octagon, but recently the lightweight king claimed that his body was in a tough fight before he ever stepped in the cage. Tsarukyan faced Makhachev back in 2019, and what was the Armenian fighter's octagon debut. Makhachev won the fight by unanimous decision, but Tsarukyan buzzed the MMA world by outstriking Makhachev overall and by even scoring a takedown. As you likely know, Makhachev and Tsarukyan are scheduled to battle again at UFC 311 on January 18th. Ahead of their rematch, the champion appeared on Yukama's YouTube. When asked about the fact that he was ill and vomiting before he fought Tsarukyan the first time, Islam said this: "You should eat the foods you ate during your weight cut, but we couldn't find halal food in St. Petersburg. It all went haphazardly and my body couldn't handle it. I barely made it to the fight, and afterwards, there was a whole story. I got fish poisoning. I couldn't recover for a long time. I weighed 74 kilograms and I should have been 80 kilograms. I couldn't recover. My body couldn't handle it." While some may point out that nearly all fighters don't go into a bout at 100%, this is interesting to hear nonetheless, as you do have to wonder how much this may have impacted Makhachev's abilities in the fight. Of course, both men have improved significantly since 2019. Who you picking to win the rematch? Paddy Pimblett Roasts media page for fake news. There's been plenty of rumors firing around lately regarding who Paddy Pimblett is going to fight next. But recently, the baddie took aim at a person who has apparently confirmed not one, not two, but 3 different opponents for Pimblett's next bout. A few days ago, the charismatic lightweight reported that verbal agreements are in place for his next fight, but as this video is being produced, no official word has been released. In the meantime, Pimblett has proceeded to call out one observer who at various junctures has reported fights with Michael Chandler, Mateusz Gamrot, and Benoit Saint-Denis targeted for the UFC's next card in London. Don't know why people even take notice of this absolute helmet running this page. He hasn't got a clue what he's talking about. Sportnet's Aaron Bronstetter also jumped in with this zinger. "My sources with knowledge of the situation have confirmed that you will not be fighting 3 different opponents in a single night." And play-by-play commentator Ben Davis also shared this fiery comment: "Paddy will sub both in round 2. Great reporting as always, you idiot." The whole fake news thing aside, who do you want Pimblett to fight next? Sean O'Malley is getting roasted by fans for meet and greet footage. Currently, Sean O'Malley has traveled to Japan to attend the Ryzen event. As he is in Japan, he's been doing a lot of meet and greets with fans. A fan asked O'Malley to kick his and many people in the MMA community found it strange. Here's the clip. Here's what the MMA community had to say. "Man, Merab broke this dude. Sean O'Malley fans are built different. Beating 0 allegations with this one. Betting be careful before Guru makes a 4-hour documentary. Why Japan people weird and make everything cringe, like just why? Stupid, is this where O'Malley is at in his career? They on some sus-ish in Japan. Bro's doing anything other than training for Umar.